Hello book lovers, and welcome back or welcome to Nat Cat's Bookish Cafe. Today I am here to do my mid-month check-in for the month of May. So far the month has been a little wonky. I don't want to say that it's been a bad reading month because I have finished some good books, but if I'm being honest, today is the 18th of the month and I didn't technically finish a book until the 16th of the month, and then I proceeded to DNF one book and complete 3 books that I will be discussing in this video. I will say that the book I DNF'd, I probably spent a little too much time trying to like, and eventually I just had to admit it wasn't for me. But in this video, I will go ahead and start by talking about that DNF, reviewing those 3 books that I did complete, and then I'll talk a little bit about what I'm currently working on and what I still need to read to complete my May TBR. Starting with my DNF, this was a very big disappointment to me. I was really hoping to love this book, if not just so I had a reason to keep it. I will say that the artist of the cover, I believe, has some prints, so I may just end up buying the print because it is so stunning. But I did DNF Angels Before Men by Raphael Nicholas. I DNF'd this at page 200. As you can see here, I didn't even get to the end of a chapter. I just DNF'd it in the middle of a chapter. I was just incredibly bored with this story. This is a queer retelling of the fall of Satan, and I think I really just struggled with the writing style and the way that the author was presenting the story. I would say that if you enjoy classics, you may enjoy this book a little bit more. I'm not always a big fan of the writing style of classics. Not that I like straightforward writing or anything like that, but I just felt like everything that was happening in the story was too drawn out, too slow. At times I felt like we were getting too much detail in some things and not enough detail in other things, and other times I felt like the author was writing things in ways that just didn't click in my brain, where I was kind of like, I don't really understand what he's trying to say. I will say I feel like someone who is more familiar with like religious texts might have a better time with this. I've never read religious texts, and I will say that this is not a pro-religion book. God is not the greatest character in this book, but I do think that it feels like whoever wrote this definitely has experience with religious texts and took influence from those, and that personally just didn't work for me. I was incredibly bored. I ended up reading the last few sentences of this book, and well, I mean, we all know the fall of Satan. I mean, it's a retelling. The ending isn't anything surprising, so it's not like I'm missing out or wondering how does the story end? It ends with Lucifer falling and becoming the king of hell. That's just kind of how it ends. I will say that one of the things I did like about this story was the depiction of God. It is not a good depiction of him, but it is unfortunately a depiction of him that is used by some people, not all people, nowadays, and it's a very toxic, self-centered, narcissistic, jealous person, and someone who expects himself to be put above all others, for you not to love anyone more than him. And I think that's a very problematic way for a god to act, and I do like that the author kind of presented him in that way in the story. But as far as the rest of the characters, I honestly often felt like I was following a bunch of college students, because we're following these angels. They live in paradise, they live forever, they go about their work, they hang out, they drink. It honestly felt like they were at a college campus and they were going to their classes and learning things, and then going out and hanging out at the park and having live music, and they seemed young and naive while also being millions and billions of years old, and it was just a really weird vibe going on that didn't work for me. Personally, I think that this book could definitely work for some people, but I'm not one of them. So unfortunately, I DNF'd. I was very upset because I mean, this cover is probably one of the most beautiful covers I have ever seen in my entire life. So I will either try to get the print, and if I'm not able to get the print, I will just keep this book just because of the cover, even though I DNF'd it. But a big disappointment. I'm not saying don't check it out. I would just say it was mostly the writing style that really just didn't click for me. On the bright side, when it came to books I actually finished, we did relatively well, and we started this month off by finishing The Heart's Invisible Furies by John Boyne. And this is my challenge book back from April, and this is a historical story in which we are following a young man. His name is like Cyril or something along this way. I don't really know how to pronounce it. Cyril. He is an Avery, though he was adopted by the Avery family, and they always kind of let him know that he wasn't a real Avery. Now, he wasn't abused or really neglected, but the people that adopted him, they seem to kind of have adopted him because they're like, oh, we should have a child. And then they never really knew what to do with the child or like how to be parents. And they just kind of met his basic needs, but not much more. He was kind of more of a tenant in his house. And we watch as he one day meets a young boy named Julian, his age, and they become friends. And our character starts to realize that he is queer in historical Ireland, which is not a good thing. I believe he was born just after the war. He was born late 1940s, and Ireland was still in the grip of the church at that time, and so being queer could cause you to go to jail, if not be thrown into the river and killed at this point. And so we just follow his life as he grows up, pretending not to be a queer man, and we follow him all the way into his, I don't know how old he is by the end, like 80s, maybe a 70s, 80s. So we do follow his entire life, and it was such an incredible story. I went into this with rather low expectations. I was worried it wouldn't be something I like. I'm not big into literary fiction often, not big into historical often. I was worried that it would be too sad, gloomy, trauma porn, you know, just pain of a queer individual for 580 pages, and I was like, ugh. But I gave this 5 stars. I gave this 5 stars. I absolutely loved the story. John Boyne's writing was incredible, and it had a ton of humor in it throughout the story. Our character had a relatively great sense of humor, whether he was doing it on purpose or not. He was a funny guy for a lot of the story, despite the fact that he did go through quite a lot of terrible things. And I just felt like the story had a really great flow throughout it, despite the fact that we are jumping from time period to time period. Sometimes we are flashing back to his past. Sometimes we are jumping forward a few years as we are following him throughout important parts of his life. There is a lot of trauma throughout this story. We are following a man who never felt safe being queer, moving into a time period where the younger generation does feel that safety a little bit more. And that's very hard for him to watch because on the one hand, he's very happy that things are changing, but at the same time, all the damage has already been done to him and his community. We do watch the AIDS pandemic in the story, which was so brutal. I always hate reading about that time period because it just upsets me like no no other. Just the fact that our country here in America, because he was in America at the time of the AIDS pandemic, completely ignored the pandemic and let it just wash all throughout the country because it was killing the right people, is such a disgusting part of our country, and our country has a lot of disgusting parts to it. But yes, that was explored. The story did make me sob my eyes out at one point, and when I put it down, I just had to shed a few more tears because that's what it deserves. You know, you close this book and you just You feel so many emotions throughout the story. The writing really was incredible. Our character was so wonderful to follow, and just watching him grow as an individual. And I felt like he met so many people throughout his life, and they would kind of pop in and out of his life, and I never really forgot them, no matter how small of a part they played, because the author did such a wonderful job of showing you how they impacted this character's life. And so they just kind of were branded onto your brain, just like they were onto this character's. And it was just so well done. I'm not sure. I mean, I definitely think I'm going to read this author again. His most well-known book is The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, which was obviously set during World War II, during the Holocaust. And I know that I've watched the movie, and so I'm not sure if I want to read that, because one of the things I really enjoyed was how much humor, how often this book made me laugh, and it balanced out, you know, the pain and fear that our character was feeling throughout his life. And I'm like, I don't feel like I would want to read a book about the Holocaust that has humor, but I also don't want to read a book that's just gonna make me sad the whole time. So I may check out some of his other work, but definitely see why it won an award for Book of the Month, because it really is an incredible read. And it is long, but at no point did I feel bored. There's just so many things happening in this man's life that were so interesting, and just really added to his character. And just watching the people around him grow, and watching him grow and their relationships shift throughout time was incredible. So if you have this book on your shelf and you've been kind of nervous about reading it because it's kind of long, or you're worried that it's just going to be like doom and gloom, I definitely think you should pick it up. It will have some doom and gloom in it, but I really do think that there's a lot of joy throughout the story as well, a lot of different friendships, romances, some found family and whatnot going on throughout it. So definitely worth checking out. Up next, I finally finished my nonfiction book. I've been reading this for a few months, and that's When They Call You a Terrorist, a Black Lives Matter memoir by Patrice Concolors and Aisha Bendel. And I am not rating this book. I don't always rate my nonfictions unless I feel like I can confidently give them a full 5 stars. And this book, I feel like I couldn't give a full 5 stars. If I had to rate it, I would give it either a really high 4-star or a 4.5 star. This book was so informative and emotional. It was really well written. As you can tell, I put a ton of tabs into it. I will say that for me, the first half of the story was a lot stronger than the second half. And the second half was actually the part that was supposed to focus on the Black Lives Matter movement. And I felt like it was not as well fleshed out as the beginning, which covered her experience as a child in a poor neighborhood with brothers who were often harassed by the police, as well as her brother Monty's, I believe his name was Monty, his experience with the prison system as someone who suffers from schizophrenia, as well as her father's experience with the prison system as someone who has PTSD from the military, as well as someone who fell in and out of drug addiction. Those stories about her father and her brother, 5 out of 5 stars. She was able to evoke such strong emotions in the reader, and you could really tell a difference between her writing about her family members and writing about the other victims of police brutality. Obviously, she felt a lot of pain for those strangers who passed, because they represent a danger to her community as well. They represent a lot of pain that her and her family have experienced throughout life, and that her community has experienced year after year, generation after generation. But you just can't compare the pain of losing a stranger to the pain of watching your father and your older brother, who you love so much, going through those same experiences. And so I almost wish that she had flip-flopped it a little bit. That way we ended on that really strong note and that the second half didn't fall flat in comparison, because I really think that if we didn't have that first half to compare the second half to, the second half would have been a 5 out of 5 stars as well. But overall, learned quite a lot, solidified a lot of my opinions about the prison system, police brutality, militarization of the military, the war on drugs, things like that, as well as resources from certain communities being drained and poured into more funds for the police, despite the fact that the police are making the communities worse instead of better. So really recommend this book. It is, I think, an older nonfiction. I mean, not super old or anything like that, but I know I've seen it floating around for quite a few years now. So if you haven't gotten around to picking it up, highly suggest that you do so, because it is definitely an important topic, and hearing about it from the people who started the Black Lives Matter movement was a really interesting experience. And finally, I finished my first audiobook of the month, and that is The Forest of a Thousand Lanterns by Julia Dow. And I ended up giving this 3 stars. I don't know really what to say about this story. I think oftentimes when it comes to young adult stories, I still enjoy kind of the horror thriller contemporary aspect, but when it comes more to fantasy, especially older fantasy like this, which was, I think, published back in like 2014, it just doesn't do much for me. It was a decent time while I was reading it. I did enjoy watching our characters descend into kind of that more villainous character. That was interesting to watch. This is, I think, a retelling of a story known as The Evil Queen. We were following a young woman who was told her entire life that she was destined to be the empress of their kingdom, and we follow her as she makes a lot of sacrifices to get to that place in life. And she definitely has to kind of sell her soul to the devil in a way to get that achievement. And I did think to a degree it was an interesting story. At the same time, it was a story I probably could have put down and DNF'd at any point and would be perfectly happy never returning to it. That being said, I do believe this is a duology and I have no plans on reading the second book. I kind of just felt like I was reading a prequel to a story where we follow a young girl who battles an evil queen, and then the author gives us the story of how the evil queen became the evil queen in the beginning. And so I just feel like the continuation of the story isn't exactly going to go anywhere special, so I don't need to continue with it. The writing was decent, the audiobook was well done, the character was interesting, nothing super exciting or out of pocket happened. I will say that I felt that the second half was a lot stronger than the first half, kind of when she started to accept the fact that she was going to have to make some difficult decisions, that she was going to have to hurt some other people, as she kind of started the characteristics of an evil queen. Things became a little bit more interesting, but overall, a 3-star read. Not something I would overly recommend, but also not something that I would turn you away from. All right, so those are the books I have finished so far. Let's take a look at what I'm currently reading. I'm not currently working on an audiobook since I just finished my other one a day or so ago, and my other 2 audiobooks that I need to read have not come in yet. I'm still on hold for those. But as far as my physical books go, I am reading Finding Joy by Adriana Herrera, and I would say I'm just about halfway through the story, maybe a couple pages under the halfway point, and I am having a good time with this story. It is just a fun contemporary romance. It's definitely got a lot of queer joy going on it right now, and it's just a quick, easy read, and definitely what I was looking for at at this time. So very happy with this. Then as far as the books I still need to read, I have these 3 physical books. The Maid is technically supposed to be an audiobook. I believe I still have like a 5-week wait on this book. I was surprised by how long of a wait this book had on it. I feel like sometimes I expect a long wait on a book and there is no wait, or other times I expect no wait on a book and it has a long wait. And I feel like that really shows a difference between the general reading community and then like the online book community. You know, what's popular here is not always what's popular out there, and I feel like that is the case with The Maid. But then again, I feel like the second book in the series recently came out, so maybe everyone's just reading this because of that. But either way, I'm hoping it comes in before the end of the month, but not 100% certain. The other audiobook I have is Delicious Monsters. I unfortunately don't know the name of the author right now, but the book is right here. And that one, I should be the next one in line, so I'm hoping that it shows up soon. Then as far as physical books go, I believe I'm going to read Seraph next, and then I'll read Under and Santi We're Here. And then we still have my current challenge book, Don Quixote, which I'm pronouncing wrong, sorry. But I was hoping to read 300 or 350 pages of this book this month. Will that happen? We're not optimistic, considering how slow of a start we had this month, thanks to my DNF and my reluctance to let that book go. But we will try and read as much as we can, but I will say it is a lower priority than these 2 books for sure. All right, guys, so those are all the books that I have read, am currently reading, and still need to read. We still have quite a few books to get through this month. I will say a couple of the physical books that I have on my TBR still are 5-star predictions, so I'm hoping for an excellent second half to the month. And I would love to know how your month is going so far. Any 5-star reads, any DNFs. And as always, thank you guys so much for supporting my channel by watching my videos, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!